could stay at your place too. We're live?
We are? All right, well, let's just wait till we see it, but...
La-da-dee.
Well, we're waiting till we see that the live stream's up, but we know that we are beginning to stream, so just wanted to say hi. I shouldn't have said that. That was...
Boom.
Boom, there we are. Okay, we are live.
You start.
Hey, guys, it's Emma Vigling with TYT Politics. You know this man.
Jordan Sheridan with TYT Politics. Tommy Tahifi Bayless behind the camera. Yesterday, he was a little gloom. I think today I see a little more color in his skin. And, oh, that sounded bad. And, yeah, we're going to have a good day. We started on time. Actually, we started early because I believe we started at 12:59. Emma has all these vibrant TYT shirts. I have gone around the country more than anybody else, and I have like 2 shirts. I've asked them repeatedly to send me more shirts. They refuse to send me more shirts. I'd like to know why.
Okay, so they're not refusing to send more shirts, but I go on that show, Cheddar. I've worn the shirt a few times. They like that I can like bring the new apparel to a new audience. Plus, I'm a girl, and you know, I do have the looks of Giselle Bunch and other models, so that's probably why they're trying to give it to me.
So explain.
That's a joke.
Explain the mic thing. We're working on it.
We're working on the mic thing. It's a work in progress as always, but we like to, you know, have our banter. It's harder when we have one mic, but we don't want the audio to be in one ear, Jordan, and then me in the other ear, because I know that's frustrating for some people. I understand that if you're listening with headphones. So that's why we're doing one mic, but we will be working on it, improving our quality every week. Hopefully I have a studio. I'm like clearly on the warpath for that, probably more than anyone, except maybe Nomiki. And yeah, so like I'm hoping our production values increase with time. Just stick with us. We are so grateful that you're watching.
And Ty, do you have any opening thoughts? We're going to talk to you later too, but any opening thoughts?
No.
Okay. Interesting. Ty's being very passive-aggressive because I've told him he has to leave my apartment. Been here for about a month and a half, but that's besides the point. Now let's talk about some real people struggling. Emma, start us off.
All right. So yesterday, if you recall, we reported on Puerto Rico and the fact that the Trump administration had refused to waive or suspend the Jones Act, which would allow for non-U.S. flag ships to go through their shipping ports and deliver supplies. Now, as of today, President Donald Trump, has done the right thing. The White House has authorized a waiver to loosen shipping rules regarding Puerto Rico that island officials say would be a significant help for recovery efforts from Hurricane Maria. Acting Department of Homeland Security Secretary Elaine Duke, never mind, said the waiver will be in effect for 10 days and will cover all products being shipped to Puerto Rico, according to a release from the department. After a 10-day period, the waiver can be extended if needed. DHS spokesman David LePan told CNN. He said the waiver was approved after it was determined that doing so would be in the interest of national defense. Once again, this is a very outdated law that was put in place during World War I. That's why the Department of Homeland Security has jurisdiction over it. It doesn't make a ton of sense, I know, but ships back in World War I were a part of the national defense. I mean, they still are, but that's why, again, the wording, the bureaucracy is a bit outdated. Again, it's an 100-year-old provision. So Trump did do the right thing. He explained his hesitation yesterday, saying a lot of people that work in the shipping industry don't want the Jones Act lifted. Very telling. Trump and his cronies, the swampy people who live in his administration, live in the swamp, are money people. I mean, Gary Cohn, Steve Mnuchin of One West Bank, which did criminal things during the housing crisis. They are all the swamp that Trump said he would drain, and they are pro-business, pro-enriching themselves. That's why they always think of industry before people. But we have to commend the Trump administration for doing the right thing. I'm glad. Okay. I mean, I'm just trying to give a little bit of credit because we don't want to do damned if you do, damned if you don't. But I'll continue. From Jose Fuentes, chairman of the Puerto Rico Statehood Council, he said, hospitals are running with generators. Frozen food warehouses are running on generators. They need to get diesel if we want to keep that food. So they need oil and fuel to be delivered to the island. The act was quickly lifted to help Texas and Florida, the Jones Act, in the wake of Hurricanes Harvey and Irma. The Department of Homeland Security said it was able to lift the restrictions quickly because the Department of Defense requested a waiver for those states, and the department hadn't yet done so for Puerto Rico. That's very important. So the Department of Homeland Security was using an excuse saying, well, the Department of Defense hasn't requested this. They're all a part of the same Trump administration. If they had actually wanted to do so for Puerto Rico, they could have easily just spoken to their buddies at the Department of Defense. You know, Homeland Security and Defense, they kind of interact a little bit. And had this waiver expedited, or this request expedited for Puerto Rico. They didn't do it because Trump cares about Texas, he cares about Florida, he cares a lot less about Puerto Rico. I will continue. Next, Congress will take up the issue of a hurricane relief package for Puerto Rico. Or maybe not. Politico reports that a formal funding request is still weeks away, as the devastation in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands is so widespread that an assessment cannot be made. Still, Congress passed a major hurricane relief package just 6 days after Hurricane Harvey struck Texas, and the government relaxed the Jones Act to deal with the Exxon Valdez oil spill, an ecological tragedy, but far from a human catastrophe. So let's just talk a little bit about that, and then we can continue reading more into how Puerto Rico has little representation in the United States government. But I guess my first reaction is I do want to give the Trump administration credit for doing this, but I think it's so obvious that without public pressure and somehow people understanding what the Jones Act was, and the added hypocrisy of what he did for Texas and what he did for Florida, but not for Puerto Rico, they wouldn't have done it. And, you know, I saw a tweet today that said after Japan's earthquake, President Trump sent an aircraft carrier over, President Obama, sent an aircraft carrier over to there within a day. It shows the differences in priorities and the extreme lack of empathy that the Trump administration displays on a consistent basis.
Well, I mean, bottom line, just look at the quote. What did he say? A lot of people that work in the shipping industry don't want the Jones Act lifted. Well, I heard a rumor that a lot of people who live in Puerto Rico want to live. So what's more important, the shipping industry and their needs, or people that, according to Mr. Fuentes, hospitals are running with generators, frozen food warehouses running on generators. They need to get diesel if we want to keep that food. I've done interviews. People with diabetes can't get access to insulin. People on dialysis, their machines have no power. Yet we need to worry about the shipping industry. This is the dangers. I'm not totally anti a business person being a politician, but this is the danger when you have people, besides the fact that he's an idiot, when you have people thinking business first, when you have people thinking, economic conditions first, frankly, when you have people thinking corporate welfare first, as opposed to people. Right now, the shipping industries, short-term, American ships being the only ones that come in, their short-term profits or business is not as important as humanitarian aid in a crisis. Because right now is for a large swath of the people, there's still chance to save lives. And what you don't see on CNN or any of these places, and for the most part, most of them are actually covering it extensively, so credit where credit is due, but there are people showing up dead in other people's homes. Puerto Rico has very little shade. It's over 80 degrees there every day with a lot of humidity, and there's not enough water. There's not enough food. So the fact, if you want to give him credit after a lot of pressure, okay, but this should have been done pretty much immediately. There should be no separate standard for Puerto Rico versus Texas and Florida, and this goes to the issue of statehood, which is a separate issue from the hurricane, but, it goes hand in hand. Puerto Rico, like Guam and other territories, are non-voting members of Congress. So the decisions on relief aid, a lot of different things, they will not have a say as they're voted on. It's also, they're talking about that it's going to take 2 weeks to vote on a relief package. 2 weeks. What are they doing? I understand they had a very nice ceremony and they clapped today for Congressman Steve Scalise, who came back from a gunshot wound. That's fine. But what are you doing? What is more important right now than humanitarian relief? It's not like it's not. It hasn't moved from like rescue to recovery. You're still in the rescue mode. So why is it that it's going to take 2 weeks for relief aid to these poor people? And secondly, this should have never been the case that it took public pressure to make an exception. Nobody was worried about the economic for ships or other things when it came to Texas and Florida. So not only is this a case, in my view, of racism, Puerto Rico is minority, but secondly, it's this mindset, America first and business first and jobs first. Well, those things need to be tossed aside when you're dealing with life or death.
I would also add on that we have this kind of sickness in this country where capitalism is our religion. I mean, that's what has been...
We're capitalists. That's it, Nancy Pelosi.
Oh, right. Exactly. But it's been ingrained in the American psyche to the point that, even if you say I'm a socialist, you got to apologize for it. You got to say, business is good, greed is good. To the point where the Supreme Court in Buckley v. Vallejo and in Bellotti in the 1976 and 78, respectively, said that corporations have personhood rights. And it is embodied by the Trump administration, by the greed in the Trump administration, so that when you see human lives and people chalking SOS into the gravel so that planes overhead can see we need help, you are thinking first about the shipping industry's short-term profits. That's a sickness. It is a warped brain that we've been infected with, or our brains have been infected with since we grew up, and we have to shake that mentality. I think politicians like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are doing a lot to shake that mentality, but nothing... The Trump administration embodies that sickness better than anything in this country. I just want to continue talking about what Puerto Rico is going to need going forward, and the fact that they don't have a voice in our Congress makes this extremely troubling and scary that they may not get that relief. Congress will next take up the issue of a hurricane relief package for Puerto Rico, or maybe not. I believe I said this earlier. Still, Congress passed those relief packages for Harvey in 6 days after Hurricane Harvey struck Texas. They have still yet to do it for Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico will have no real say in whatever decision Congress makes. The stakes could not be higher. One estimate pegs hurricane damage at more than $72 billion. That's amazing. Not in the good way. Maria came just a month after Puerto Rico declared a soft bankruptcy in May following a debt crisis that Fuentes and other critics say was spurred in large part to Puerto Rico's inequitable standing vis-a-vis the rest of the country. It's possible that the damage wrought by Maria could even exceed a debt that ruined the island financially. What we talked about yesterday is that the Jones Act, the very one that Trump needed to wouldn't suspend until he had to do it kicking and screaming, has cost the nations of Puerto Rico, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico's economy, billions of dollars. Some estimates range from $2 to, I believe, $6 billion a year for including Hawaii and Alaska, because Puerto Rico is a commonwealth. They don't want them essentially having their own trade and associating with governments outside of the United States sanctioned ships and trading situations. So this hamstrings them and cuts into their economic development because they can only do it when, big brother U.S. says they can trade with certain countries. And since 85% of their economy is based on importation, this raises prices. This forces them into an economic stranglehold that has contributed to their debt. And now Trump is blaming them for that debt when it is literally the condition of their oppression that debt has accrued. It's this constant victim blaming that you see not only in the Trump administration but throughout the country, especially in conservative movements.
And can you share videos on YouTube? I know I sound like a 95-year-old grandpa, because on Facebook I say share the video. You can press the share button here, right?
You'd have to share it on a social media platform.
Okay, share the video. Let's get this out there so more people. We're going to start doing this more often, but I don't know if everybody knows. Emma and I are live right now, so let's press the share button, get it out there. I will close with this in terms of Puerto Rico. The bottom line is, as I always say in Flint and other places, you might not live in Puerto Rico, you might not be Puerto Rican, it might be very far away from you, but this matters because these climate change induced, they're not created by climate change, but these storms that are becoming more and more deadly and happening more and more periodically, they're not going to stop only for Puerto Rico or the Virgin Islands, which I didn't mention yesterday, or Texas or Florida. If you would have told people in New York 5 years ago that a storm like Sandy could have done the destruction it did, people would have said, oh, we don't have storms like that. So these kinds of storms can and will be coming to you because we have an administration now who is asleep at the switch. And through idiocy and, in my view, playing to a base, are pretty much just recklessly tossing climate change aside. But it's not just because the people are a minority in Puerto Rico, it's because they're poor. There is a different standard and a different emergency relief effort if you are white and wealthier or upper middle class versus poor, impoverished, and as Trump says, on an island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Derogatorily, in my opinion. So it's very important that you show your support for Puerto Rico. Also, we've put up videos on the channel. In the description, we have some donation links that I personally trust. Everybody make your own decisions, but I personally looked into them and think they're reputable. So definitely check it out, and we'll keep reporting. Obviously, there is definitely a need for gas, water, food, supplies, and, I hate to say thoughts and prayers, but at this point, that's the only thing really we could do in addition to making people aware. What do we got next?
All right. Thanks, guys, for watching, by the way. I hope everyone's having a grand old time. All right, you want to talk about Diane Feinstein?
Oh, from one hurricane to another disaster.
Right. All right. Let me just fix my hair. Okay. Senator Diane Feinstein of California. Will she run for re-election? No one is exactly sure, but half of California voters apparently don't want her to. California is often listed as the most progressive state in the country. I think they have a case for that, and they're showing their distaste for Diane Feinstein in the polling. Half of likely California voters say Senator Diane Feinstein should not run for re-election, according to a new poll conducted by the Public Policy Institute of California. 46% of California adults and 50% of likely voters say Feinstein should not seek a sixth term, according to the poll. Yet the survey does not test Feinstein against any other potential candidates, and a majority of Democrats, 57%, say Feinstein should run again. So she's above water in the Democratic Party, but still, that's not good. Only 57% of registered Democrats or people who identify as Democrats say she should run again. Though Feinstein's public approval has ticked down slightly from January, it stands at a relatively favorable 48% among California adults and 54% among likely voters. The poll comes as Feinstein sustains increased criticism from her party's left flank, with the possibility of a Democratic challenger in next year's election. Feinstein, a centrist Democrat, has been criticized by progressive activists for her skeptical view of single-payer health care and support for some of President Donald Trump's earliest nominees. She was booed after telling an audience last month that it could be possible for Donald Trump to become a good president. As you know, California voted through a single-payer system, but it was kind of nixed because they said they didn't have the budgetary resources and they didn't know how they were going to pay for it. You figure out how to pay for it once you pass a bill. That's how most bills work. But yes, it's encouraging that California was the first state to at least push it forward. I hope it comes back again. But since the state legislature and the citizenry in California was for single payer, it is really disheartening to know that their senator, one of their senators, is against it. Obviously, Senator Kamala Harris, the freshman senator, their other senator, younger face in California, is a proponent of single payer and was the first announced co-sponsor of Bernie Sanders' bill in the Senate. So there is a real diametric juxtaposition between Feinstein and Kamala Harris, who she has her question marks, but has in her record in the Senate so far been fairly progressive. So my thoughts on this are, where is the challenger? She's up for re-election in 2018. Go now. Go now. Start your campaign now. She is so vulnerable. And with enthusiasm in 2018, she could be out. Come on. Justice Democrats, whatever, do it. Go after her. Seriously, right?
Oh, Diane. I know I'm just a Bernie bro, and people are going to call me sexist, but, Diane Feinstein, I think, is a real symbol of where the Democratic Party has gone wrong over the last 20 to 30 years. First of all, her and John McCain in another life would be in love. Maybe they are in love, and, we wish you well, Mr. McCain. She's never known a war, doesn't love, never pushed a war, never not pushed a war. And, you look at some of her top donors, kind of your typical suspects. Her top donor is PG&E Corporation. If you're in California, that's the Pacific Gas
And Electric.
Yeah, it's the biggest monopoly in California in terms of electricity and gas. She has gotten a whopping $191,450. So that's a lot of money for a senator. That's almost $200,000 just from then. You got Time Warner, owner of CNN. Wonder why they did a very, very lovely, Dana Bash did a very, very lovely interview or special, I think it was, on Diane Feinstein. $142,000. Wells Fargo, $118,000. Emily's List, $100,000. Bank of America, almost $100,000. And General Dynamics, another goodie, $92,000. Also, in addition to just being your typical Wall Streeter, neocon, all these things, she's out of touch. And it's not only because of her age. Like Mitch McConnell, I think her net worth is upwards of $15 million. Her husband, there's been some ethical issues with her husband and possibly her helping to push through business that might have helped him. That happened a few years ago. At a town hall, I think Emma might have mentioned it, but she basically, like Nancy Pelosi, well, Medicare for all, we're just not ready for that, this and that. Well, it's because of people like Diane Feinstein, who takes a hell of a lot of money from the insurance industry, Nancy Pelosi takes a hell of a lot of money from the insurance industry, that we don't get Medicare for all in the most progressive, democratically run state in the country. So Diane Feinstein, I think she does need to go. And there does seem, there's not a declared candidate yet, but apparently there's an organization that just formed essentially to challenge her. Bay Area progressives announced Sunday afternoon they formed an organization to primary Feinstein from the left, calling themselves Trump-Free California. The group called upon California State Senate President Pro Tem Kevin De Leon to challenge Feinstein in the 2028 election and launched the website kevinspeaksforme.com. We should say Feinstein has not formally announced that she's rerunning.
Yes, and she is, I believe, 82 years old.
You said it, not me.
No, I'm not ageist at all. I just mean she may want to retire. I actually saw an interesting op-ed from a local California paper that said ageism was the reason that progressives are against Diane Feinstein. I gotta say, it's really ageist of those progressives to be supportive of Senator Bernie Sanders. It's just like they just hate old people. That's what it is. They want young people who are smoking the reefer and listening to the Fetty Wap and all of that kind of stuff. So Senator Diane Feinstein, Jordan listed the top companies that have donated to her, the top industries in her career, which spans from 1991 to currently. Lawyers and law firms, you see that often with corporatist Democrats. Top donor, $3.7 million. Retirees, that's a good industry for Democrats to be getting donors from. Bernie, I believe, gets a lot from them. $2 million. Real estate, not as great. Again, we talked about Steve Mnuchin having his hand in California real estate. I don't know if he's part of those donors, but $1.8 million. Securities and investment, 1.7, almost 1.7 million. TV, movies, and music, 1.6. That makes a lot of sense. She's from California. Health professionals, dicey. It's very vague. Again, these campaign finance laws don't allow for enough disclosure. So health professionals could be people advocating for universal health care donating to her. I mean, Bernie has received, I think, around $2 million from health professionals in his career, but kind of doubt that the $1.1 million that she's received from health professionals are advocating for those principles. Everything else falls below the $1 million mark, but that's a lot of money, and it makes sense. Look, that's a very typical donor base for a kind of corporatist Democrat. I am surprised that in the top amount of donors it isn't any defense contractors, because she has been very pro-war in her career. And then let's just add one more. What did I want to add about Diane Feinstein? Oh, the ethical problems. You touched on those with her husband, but I know it sounds kind of hypocritical because Jane Sanders is undergoing a certain investigation and we support Bernie, but it's about essentially she made a bad investment when she was the head of Burlington College. It's crumbs compared to what's going on with Diane Feinstein. Her husband's real estate firm is poised to make $1 billion selling post offices, so not the same thing. California Democratic Senator Diane Feinstein is back in the news as a giant real estate investment firm run by her husband, Rich Bloom, is potentially poised to earn as much as $1 billion in commissions from selling U.S. Postal Service's buildings across the country. Several years ago, Feinstein said that she exerted no influence in the process that led to Bloom's company, CBRE Group, then the world's largest commercial real estate services firm, obtaining an exclusive contract to market USPS facilities as part of a larger federal effort to reduce the deficit. The USPS, the U.S. Postal Service, is a federal agency. Diane Feinstein is a senator in the federal government. So I don't know how that's not a conflict of interest. And $1 billion, again, is a lot of money. There's a push to privatize the Postal Service. It's not talked about a lot, but I don't really know her position on it. It wouldn't surprise me if she was a part of that because, again, her husband is trying to buy up these Postal Service buildings. Feinstein dismissed the conflict of interest allegations at the time, which were followed by numerous investigative reports criticizing the deal. The USPS Inspector General issued a report saying the contract was not how it previously sold properties and was unlikely to reduce USPS costs. California-based investigative reporters found that CPRE was selling properties below market value to clients. Properties, which means the buyers could likely profit if they resold to them. So it looks shady. It's designed to increase the profits of her husband and her subsequently. Just another reason why Diane Feinstein should be out, and something that CNN is not going to report on, MSNBC is not going to report on, but they're going to show her in an aggrandizing light when she hammers people in the Russia investigations.
Lastly, I will say this. You know, at a certain point, forget Diane Feinstein, but that's why we need term limits. At a certain point, you're in the club for too long, okay? After a while, she's 84, I'm not trying to be an ageist, but it's time, besides the fact that she's corrupt and bought off, it's time to pass the baton, Diane. It's go retire. Same thing with Hillary. I mean, when you're in Washington for that long, you are disconnected. She is very disconnected from the average working class person in California. Just because it's an overly democratic and progressive state, California has some of the highest taxes in the country, and California is the biggest state. Is it Texas or California? I think California. So, it's bigger than many countries. So when you have people like Diane Feinstein, Nancy Pelosi in office for too long, you kind of get what you get, which is a very disconnected from reality point of view. And by the way, it wasn't reported on CNN or anything, but Medicare for All not passing in California, that doesn't happen without Nancy Pelosi's input. That doesn't happen without Diane Feinstein's input. If they wanted it, and there was will, and they thought, that's what they wanted for their state, Nancy Pelosi said, it's not right on the federal level yet, but let's use the states as a laboratory, I think was her words. Well, California, it was ready to go, and passed the Senate, and the House stopped it. So I would love to see her primaried. It might not even matter if she decides not to run, but my hunch is she will run. So we'll see what happens, but we'll continue covering the Feinsteins of the world, the Heidi Heidkamps, the Joe Manchins. Obviously, there is Justice Democrats. There's other parties that might be challenging some of these Democrats, so we'll see what happens. And you will be doing, starting soon, a pretty in-depth series on the corporate Democrats up for re-election next year.
Yes. When I have the time, I've been on overdrive. Also, I'm getting in the comments, are you Norwegian? Yes. Because there is a famous Vigeland Park. I just want to tell people that because I am proud to be Norwegian. I'm I'm a quarter Finnish. I'm a quarter Norwegian. My dad's side's Norwegian. My mom's side's Finnish. Damn. My dad's father was a Norwegian immigrant. My mom's mom was a Finnish immigrant. So I'm really Scandinavian. I'm also like 5'9", so that's part of why you can notice it. Yeah.
Who's going to come up with a T-shirt design that shows Emma's half Finnish, half Norwegian, half mermaid, half... She's got a lot going on, so...
Half mermaid, I know. Well, I wish I was. God. Under the sea. All right. I guess you want to talk about Russia?
By the way, does nobody care about my origins? I have a complicated and interesting story.
I can't really tell what Jordan's background is. He only loves Curb Your Enthusiasm and says schwitz regularly.
We'll talk about that.
All right. So Russian hacking, right? You want to talk about that?
I do.
Okay. So we're hearing a lot of Russia stuff. Full disclosure, I think Russia did attempt to interfere in the elections in the sense that they wanted to institute propaganda. They seem to have communicated with the Trump administration. That evidence, in my opinion, at this point is fairly overwhelming. What isn't overwhelming, and it is incredibly suspect, are claims, often hysterical claims, that the Russian government hacked our election system. Hillary Clinton has said that there should be an investigation into it, and a lot of people in the center in the Democratic Party are advocating for it. There is
more specifically voting machines.
Voting machines, which I will outline in this article. So apparently, people do think that Russia may have hacked our voting systems, and California has now rebuked that claim, which was started, which had a claim that that's origin was from the Department of Homeland Security. California's top elections official has rebutted a federal claim that hackers targeted the state's election infrastructure, one day after Wisconsin also cast doubt on the Department of Homeland Security's warnings. Last week, it was reported that DHS had contacted elections officials in 21 states to warn of hackers potentially connected to Russia, targeting state election systems ahead of the 2016 presidential election. The announcement augmented concerns about the integrity of American elections, already in the spotlight as Congress probes a wide-ranging Russia disruption effort. Let me just pause there for a second and say, the integrity of American elections is something that is incredibly concerning, but it's because we have given personhood rights to corporations who literally buy off politicians. 93 to 95% of the time, the person with more money wins. The Princeton study, the opinions of the general public has a statistically insignificant correlation to public policy. Public policy and corporations and moneyed interests, almost a direct correlation. So that has to do with election integrity. This is gobbledygook and is a part of a hysteria that takes away from the very real aspects of how Russia did attempt to favor Donald Trump in the U.S. elections. But I'll continue. But California Secretary of State Alex Padilla said on Wednesday that DHS was wrong to conclude hackers scanned the elections monitored networks, saying that the probe targeted a different state agency. California voters can further rest assured that the California Secretary of State elections infrastructure and websites were not hacked or breached by Russian cyber actors, Mr. Padilla said in a statement. Our notification from the DHS last Friday was not only a year late, it also turned out to be bad information. I remain committed to a partnership with DHS and other intelligence agencies. However, elections officials and the American public expect and deserve timely and accurate information, added Mr. Padilla, who has been a fierce critic of the Trump administration and its Commission on Election Integrity. The correction from Mr. Padilla marked the second time this week the veracity of DHS's warning has come under question. Earlier this week, Wisconsin officials shared an email from DHS clarifying that hackers had scanned the state's Department of Workforce Development, not its Elections Commission. So again, we saw I believe, a Washington Post article that just said 21 states may have been hacked by Russian hackers. That was the headline, and they highlighted the states on the map. Now, Wisconsin, California saying, nuh-uh. I don't understand why papers like the Washington Post, which, sometimes we're overly critical of papers like that. They do great journalism. They break the stories that we can discuss. But if there is a criticism, I think there's a really valid one to say that they just regurgitate sometimes talking points from the government and take them at face value instead of being extremely skeptical and critical. And this is an example of that. California Secretary of State saying, no, that didn't happen, yet it was widely reported in major papers.
I think that, it's important to point out two different things. So I think Emma's right. At this point, it's kind of beyond reasonable doubt. Like, the Trump administration and Russian government officials had meetings. There were emails back and forth. Trump was attempting to build a hotel in Moscow during the election, which I still can't get over. Obviously, Trump, he will slam NFL players. He will slam the mailman. He will slam John McCain. He will slam Mexicans. He will slam everybody but Putin, all that. So I think it's very clear that there's untoward relations. I don't know about collusion, because that implies, I don't think there's evidence that, the Russian government was the source for WikiLeaks yet. I mean, I haven't seen the evidence, although a lot of the media just, like she said, regurgitates what they say. So I do think there's evidence that they were collaborating to help the Trump campaign. I also think, common sense, Donald Trump's son years ago said some of our biggest business in terms of real estate is with Russia, going back to the fact that they were trying to build a Trump Tower in Moscow during the campaign. So I think if you want to have your head buried in the sand that there's financial dealings between the two sides, yes. In terms of Russia doing propaganda on social media and things like that, that's actually been happening for many years. So it's not the biggest breaking news. I just think the media is salivating on it because they are trying to kind of stir up that Cold War hysteria. It's not a good thing that, they do propaganda, but, there's no exit polls or scientific way to know that's why somebody wins or loses. You know what I mean? I think a lot of the cake was baked in terms of anti-Hillary Clinton feeling, and probably Rush Limbaugh on Fox News had a lot more to do with that, and frankly Hillary Clinton, than Russian bots online. What I think is dangerous, and why I wanted to talk about this today, is frankly, the media kind of just reports and regurgitates whatever DHS, the CIA, the FBI tells them. That doesn't mean that the FBI, the DHS, the CIA, and intelligence agencies are always wrong or always intentionally lying, but it's on journalists not to just take in the information, and because you've had cocktails with these people or these people and you just want to break something, to just report it. Because when you report it, it just adds to that narrative that we're in Russia, some sinister thing is going on. And again, Russia is a nuclear power, and you should be careful with that kind of reporting. And also, as Glenn Greenwald, who I respect a lot and admire, he tweeted this, and I think he's right, if I could find it. Hold on. La-da-dee, la-da-da.
I can find it. I have it.
This happens over and over and over, yet any questioning of claims about Russia results in immediate accusations about patriotism and loyalty. He's right. So there's still, the Washington Post literally still has a story up with the headline, Russia hacked Vermont's electrical grid. It's been debunked. It's not true. It came from intelligence agencies. It's wrong. The New York Times is still reporting that Russia hacked France's election, even though the president, that beautiful man Macron, has come out saying it's not true. I'm not defending Russia. I mean, Putin kills journalists. They've killed gay people in Russia. It's an awful, awful authoritarian country, and I don't want to go there. And I'm not defending Russia, but we got to keep things into perspective. And this is just another example that journalists and viewers should take everything with a grain of salt and demand concrete information, because how you start the beating for war, whether it's in Russia, North Korea, or whatever, is uncritically taking information from government sources who many times have their own human biases and might be taking leaps with their intelligence.
I agree. Honestly, I don't think we have anything to add, really. That was great.
And Vladimir, I'm missing my check this month, so let me know.
Well, we're getting in the comments that the Democrats are actually donating to Jank, and that's why we're getting our paychecks. So Hillary Clinton's donating to Jank, and that's why he's apparently soft on the Democrats. Have you gotten your check yet?
No. In fact, I would like more money. So I don't want the Democrats to donate to Jank, but I would like more money. Yeah, I don't get that. I know there's a lot of criticism of Jank and TYT, and some of it's valid. I've been public when I think they're covering Trump too much or this and that, but I've seen like 4 or 5 segments in the last month where he was going hard at the Democratic Party, hard at the people attacking Bernie for no reason. He ripped Hillary's book a new one, so I don't. If they're donating money to Jank, they're not getting their money's worth, I would say.
Yeah, I know. You see, these people are pretty good with their investments. They say, "Hey, Hillary Clinton, here's $25,000 or $2,500. I can't. $225,000 for a speech."
225,000.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. The numbers, I just can't do it. For a speech, and you'll be favorable to us. I mean, it doesn't seem like Jank's really held up his end of the bargain here, but oh well. These conspiracy theorists, I can't deal with it. What do you want to talk about next? Oh, Price and Pruitt, the dynamic duo.
Yeah.
Can you intro this?
Sure. As I dubbed it, as Trump's draining the swamp, his whole administration is flying right over it. So, yeah, obviously, if you didn't know, Tom Price, it came out, has been taking private jets. He's the Health and Human Services director. He actually criticized this kind of behavior while he was in Congress. And now it comes out that Environmental Protection Agency Chief Scott Pruitt, who denies climate change and all common sense, is also taking all sorts of goodies at your taxpayer expense. EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt, a climate change denier who is pushing for sweeping budget cuts at the agency, apparently has no qualms about loosely spending some of that budget on himself. In his first 7 months on the job, the former Oklahoma Attorney General has racked up a questionable tab that includes non-commercial airfare, an unprecedented security detail, and a soundproof booth for making confidential phone calls. Who the hell are you calling in a soundproof booth? That's very troubling. CBS News reported Wednesday that Pruitt and other EPA staff took a private flight July 27th from Tulsa to Guymon, Oklahoma, where Pruitt spoke to farmers about his plans to nix the Obama administration's Waters of the United States rule. The flight, booked by the Interior Department as part of an interagency program, later took the group to Oklahoma City. The total cost $14,285. In all, Pruitt's non-commercial airfare has cost taxpayers more than $58,000, according to reports by CBS and the Washington Post. That includes $36,000 flight aboard a military jet, and from Cincinnati, where he joined President Donald Trump for a speech on infrastructure. And during the visit to Colorado, Pruitt blasted the Obama administration for failing to protect local communities and the environment. EPA spokesperson Liz Bowman, by the way, the EPA and their press people, I'm working on a longer form story. They're very, 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 shall we say, prone to spin. Anyway, EPA spokesperson told Huffington Post that Pruitt has taken 1 charter flight and 3 government flights. However, she didn't respond to questions about what those flights cost were and why they were required. I think the bottom line, all of this goes into, on one end, Donald Trump is a racist. He's a fascist. He is, I think just vile. And I think not only his statements, but his actions and his history prove that. On the other end, I mean, this man is a con man. And I'm still surprised that I think some of his supporters are starting to see it, but not enough. I think they go to his rally yesterday pushing tax relief for the middle class, when if they actually know anything about the plan, it's a giant wet kiss to corporate America, to yacht owners. We talked about it yesterday. And this guy wants to drain the swamp, and he wants to get rid of bloated bureaucracy in the government and wasted money, yet Pruitt is making a soundproof audio booth so he can make, his calls in private to the big oil industry and, the mining industry and big agriculture and all these special interests. And Tom Price, Health and Human Services, they're basically taking the government for a joyride at your expense. And then we're told, we got to cut the fat when it comes to Medicaid. We got to cut the fat when it comes to, public education. We got to cut the fat when it comes to FEMA that Trump was trying to cut. Yet, his aides, they could go around. And that's not even to mention how much it costs to protect President Trump's very large family, who are taking international trips, and it's costing us way more than previous presidents because his family is huge and they take a lot of international trips. We got to spend money on that. Trump's a con man. I digress.
But that's why it's just the hypocrisy of spending and bureaucracy it's so important to point it out, because when they use bureaucracy and billions of dollars in spending as an excuse to take away your water, your clean air, when Scott Pruitt is advocating for healthcare positions that would strip 32 million people of their health insurance, and they use it as an excuse saying we're spending too much money, you have to point this out. You have to point out that they are not concerned about spending money when it comes to themselves. That's because that old conservative William F. Buckley, cut, don't spend so much, philosophy is not really what they ascribe to. What they ascribe to is capitalism and their own enrichment. That's really all they care about. And they've co-opted a philosophy that a lot of people agree with. Rand Paul ascribes to it fairly truthfully. I don't agree with it, but it's at least honest. But they've co-opted it so that they can enrich their own pockets. And that's what's so disgusting about it, because in a healthy society, we have liberals and conservatives debating, and they're honest actors, and their positions are something that they actually believe in. That's the ideal that we should ascribe to in a just society. But people like this, cynical people who just care about their bottom line and their pockets. I mean, Scott Pruitt is the worst of the worst. Tom Price is terrible too, but I really think Scott Pruitt might be the worst person in Trump's administration. They do a disservice to the honesty of political debate, in addition to just robbing the American people blind just so that they can get a few more bucks and fly on a private jet. I mean, it's gross. It's gross. The idea that they even pretend to be public servants, should have the founding fathers rolling in their graves.
And I will end with this. In fairness, these aren't the first. Trump administration is not like the inaugural hypocrites or the inaugural corrupt. I mean, Obama, it's a little different. He ran for re-election on income inequality, quoted Teddy Roosevelt, those fat cat bankers. Well, he's having a grand old time right now talking to those fat cat bankers for a lot of money. Hillary Clinton did it as well. But at least Obama didn't run on draining the swamp and, we're going to cut the bureaucracy. He ran on a lot of things that he didn't follow through on. But I think Trump, it's a unique thing because he really connected with a lot of Rust Belt people, a lot of people in the South about, draining that government into the, what do they say? So that it could drain down the bath drain. Well, 58,000 might not sound like a lot. 14,000 might not sound like a lot. But if you're doing it over and over and over again, and it's not only just the amount of money, it's the double standard, right? It's the same thing for, we're going to end your Obamacare, yet we're going to keep the best health care for ourselves in government. It's hypocrisy. That's why the government should play by the same rules as Emma and I and Ty and do. We always talk about the different legal system for government officials, for corporate America versus everybody else. This is the same thing. And Trump says, now that they've been caught, I'm very upset about it, and I'm going to do something about it. Yeah, maybe he'll do something about it. Maybe he won't. I bet you he won't.
Let me just add that he's not really upset about it. Trump robs people blind constantly.
Puerto Rico.
Yeah, but I think he's mostly upset with Tom Price specifically because Tom Price was supposed to be the establishment guy that came into his cabinet that gave him a connection to the Senate and the House. He knows those guys, and he's failed. He's failed to have them deliver on that healthcare proposal. He was supposed to be the conduit between the drain the swampy, anti-establishment people in the Trump administration and Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan and those guys in Congress. And he's completely failed in that regard. Tom Price has been an abject failure in his position from Trump's perspective, and thank God he has been. Scott Pruitt, I don't think Trump has actually come out and condemned Scott Pruitt for these these actions. He has come out for Tom Price, and if he doesn't for Pruitt, I think my theory will be proved a little bit correct.
And stay tuned. Don't leave. I'm going to announce at the end of this where I'm going next. Dun, 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 dun. Not that I'm like a boy band or something going on a tour, but I will be going somewhere next week along with Ty if he gets his act together, and I'm going to announce where I'm going next week. Could be a town near you. So before we get to a fun segment at the end, I want to talk about minimum wage and LGBTQ. They always add another letter. It's very confusing. Protections under assault. This is from The Nation. For at least a decade now, the far right has exploited its near total domination of state government to clamp down on the mere possibility that progressive change could take root in the small specks of blue, the defiant, often democratic cities that hover in their midst. Don't know if I agree with that completely, because it's a lot of establishment Democrats that are part of the problem too in those cities, including Michigan and Detroit and Flint. From Arkansas and Texas to Alabama and Missouri, reactionary legislatures and governors have used their power to roll back promising local legislation. Minimum wage ordinances, sanctuary city laws, LGBTQ anti-discrimination regulations, and other achievements meant to better the lives of immigrants, people of color, the working class, and the queer community, among others. Governor of Texas Greg Abbott, for instance, signed an extraordinary punitive bill in May that effectively bans sanctuary cities in the state and prohibits local elected officials from restricting police cooperation with federal immigration authorities. The same month, Missouri passed a law that voided St. Louis's new $10 an hour minimum wage, sending it back down to $7.70, and barring other cities from raising wages above that rock bottom number. In 2016, in Alabama, the state government took a similar action, reversing a Birmingham ordinance that would have lifted the minimum wage to $10.10 in 2017. If you're a diehard TYT politics fan, I actually went to Alabama and covered that ridiculous story. Then, of course, there's the legislative monstrosity out of North Carolina, HB 2, a 2016 law that eradicated the ability of cities there to pass LGBT anti-discrimination ordinances, wage regulations, and other progressive measures. I'm not going to read the whole story, but bottom line, minimum wage is under attack. They're not just now trying to stop it from being raised, they're now rolling it backwards, which we just saw in St. Louis. LGBTQ protections, they're now rolling it backwards on the state level, and as you see in the federal level, Trump apparently thinks he could just legislate by tweet, banning transgender people, and then Defense Secretary James Mattis was like, hold your toupee for a second, and now they're reviewing it. But I think what's really, it's easy to just attack the Republicans. We should. This is vile. It's vile. Study after study has debunked their BS, fear-mongering about it. If you raise the minimum wage, it cripples business. Last time I checked, Seattle is standing strong. And they raise I don't think it's all the way at $15. They're systematically every year or every other year raising it up another notch, but Seattle's economy has not cratered. Other cities that have raised the minimum wage are not cratering. It's common sense. You put more money in the people who spend the money more pocket, it stimulates business. But it's kind of Emma was talking earlier about the sickness of capitalism, and I think in many ways it is a sickness. It's very easy for, generally speaking, wealthy people with good government benefits, good government health care to say, this is what the Missouri governor said, it's going to hurt other business, it's going to hurt business. Well, what about the poor people you're hurting? What about the people that you just gave them a glimmer of hope? You just gave them extra pocket money to start paying off their exorbitant student loan debt, to start paying off their mortgages and their car loans or whatever it is. Now you're rolling them backwards. That's a unique type of sickness. That's why, next week I will be going to St. Louis to cover this minimum wage monstrosity where they rolled it back. If you're from St. Louis and you're watching right now, message TYT Politics. If you are affected by this being rolled back, if you know people affected, local politicians that aren't corrupt I could talk to, I usually book my interviews through you, the audience. So message on Facebook, TYT Politics, if you're in St. Louis or the surrounding area. I'm also going to go to some other places too, but I'm going to start in St. Louis. The other thing about this is, Trump on the campaign trail, he was kind of like, I wouldn't say progressive, but he said some nice things about gay people. But he's not doing a damn thing about any of this. He endorses, he champions restricting the rights of minorities, whether you're black, whether you're gay, it doesn't matter. And lastly, I know you have to send out your fundraising emails. I know you have to send out your emails about Russia. Why isn't the Democratic Party? This is a political winner to be on the attack on this. I don't hear anything from the Democratic Party nationally. And I actually interviewed a local St. Louis senator about this 2 months ago, and she said the same thing. She attacked Republicans, but she said, we need to hear more from the Democratic Party on what they're doing in St. Louis and what they're doing in Alabama. I don't hear anything.
Speaking specifically about the LGBTQ fight, I was reading this great book called Devil's Bargain by Joshua Green about Steve Bannon and his influence on Trump's administration, and his entire philosophy for the campaign was make the Democrats defend black people, Latino people, minorities, because they don't have an economic message. They have to, I would say, take up this minimum wage fight and show that, yeah, Trump's not just going after minorities. He's going after people's livelihood, and he's going after everyone. And the Republican Party on the local level is going after everyone. So that's just kind of a side point. But what is so ironic about this is, Greg Abbott shutting down these sanctuary cities. I thought Republicans were for small government. Oh, but when it's the federal government imposing on your state power because you want to be able to do whatever the hell you want, that's when you want small government, local government, state government, right? But what about the municipalities and the towns beneath you? Then you don't have a problem stamping on them at all. So how are you different from the big bad federal government coming in to tell you what to do? Because you're going into towns and telling them what they want, what they can do. Because it's not about this, again, a real, genuine conservative philosophy. It's about, hey, how can I exercise my power and be and institute whatever I want, which is essentially stamping on people of color, stamping out minorities, and making sure that minimum wage people are essentially, or workers are essentially indentured servants who have to work multiple jobs and live in abject poverty. If at minimum, the minimum wage, if it kept up with inflation, should be at $11 or $12. That was Hillary Clinton. She wanted $12. Bernie said $15. Different economists have different opinions on it. But it damn sure shouldn't be $7.25.
Elizabeth Warren says $20.
Damn, all right.
And she's actually right if you read most economists say inflation would bring it to $20.
Okay, so what I'm saying, I'm trying to give a basement $11.
And CB says Emma is woke.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, CB. Anyway, that's really all I had to add to that.
And I will say this to wrap up before we get to a fun segment. At the end of the day, you can't depend on the Democratic Party to be there for the workers. I know Emma and I disagree sometimes. The bottom line is, in verbiage, they're there for you, but in practice, I don't know who is just forget morality for a second, just political strategy. This is a winner. I don't understand why they are not in front of the press cameras, in front of the cameras right now, talking about that, the state legislatures connected to Donald Trump are rolling back the minimum wage and challenging Donald Trump to explain why he's not for the minimum wage. Let me tell you something. There's a lot of Republicans who are going to be hurt by this moving backwards. It's a political winner. Minimum wage actually posed pretty damn well, yet the Democratic Party, for some reason, doesn't do anything. Does it have anything to do with their donors? Curious, because there's a reason Hillary Clinton was only for $12. There's a reason the Center for American Progress kind of teetered on the minimum wage. It all is connected to money. But at the end of the day, these are real people that are going to be hurt in St. Louis. These are real people. I interviewed a young black woman who worked at Burger King down in Alabama. I mean, I don't know how she has a house over her head with all her expenses making $7.25 at Burger King. Really, through no fault of her own, she went to school. But like many others, life circumstances happened and she couldn't finish. So the Democratic Party needs to be fighting for St. Louis, for Alabama, and by the way, this is happening in Minnesota and other places where state legislatures are essentially blocking the cities and local municipalities from setting their own minimum wage. Well, why have local government then? Why have these local governments if they can't actually make policy and make progress themselves because the state is going to block them? That's not democracy, if you want to talk about democracy being under attack. So I'll be in St. Louis next week. I'm probably going to St. Louis, probably then go east, stop by East Chicago, Indiana to follow up 1 year later. After that lead crisis, probably then go back to Flint, where I'm working on a big story, and who knows, Ty and I might get in a little trouble from there. So stay tuned, and Emma is going to be working on a lot of other things here too. Nomiki was actually just in London, where she interviewed Jeremy Corbyn, so we'll have that up for you as soon as we could turn it around. Pretty good interview there, and we're going to have other stuff peeling out. I'd like to end on a lighter note. First of all, congratulations to Jon Snow. Recently engaged.
Yeah,
did you know that?
I did.
If you're a Game of Thrones enthusiast, he's getting married to the red-haired
Ygritte. I know all the names. You don't. You're not a big fan like me. I read the fan posts and the reviews after. So Ygritte, who died by the arrow of Ollie. Yeah, they're getting married. Sorry, spoiler alert, but that was in season 4 or 5.
Are you talking about the Wildling? Mm-hmm. Oh, they were engaged?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Oh, and I have some sad news for you. Actually, I was just texted this. Okay, so you were I want to see his face. So you were I don't know why I'm doing this, but she has cancer. Julia Louis-Dreyfus. You're a Seinfeld fan, right?
She has cancer?
Yeah, isn't that horrible?
Oh man, I love Veep too. We wish Julia Louis-Dreyfus very speedy recovery. We'll have to look at the details. Another sad note, I remember the first time I masturbated as a child was to Playboy magazine. Hugh Hefner has died at the age of 91. That happened overnight. The famous founder of Playboy Mansion. Hugh, we love you. Thank you for the memories. Sorry for the TMI, but that's just how I roll. And sometimes I just
91 is a long life.
91 is a long life, and you know what? He took a lot of pills. Let's just keep it real. So that's a long life.
You can't be mad at his life too. 91 years of doing what he did, or 50, however many years, you can't be mad at.
Well,
Yeah.
okay, so but I'm seeing a lot of like stupid frat boys from my college like Instagramming. You have their legend, like yeah. I get you got to live vicariously through him.
He created a lot of jobs.
I met him twice. He's on the chair.
If you guys can't hear, Ty met Hugh Hefner twice.
Yeah, he came to the school.
He came to the school when he was at UST Film School. I mean, I'm having to translate because you're talking.
Yeah, come on over
you're
here,
talking
Ty.
as if people can hear you.
People like you. They want to see your face. Come on over here.
Go ahead, I'm listening.
All right. Well, I mean, I don't know what. The New York Giants are 0-3, but I think they could turn it around on Sunday.
CB agrees. I masturbated too to Playboy, and I'm a girl. See, it's very common. I don't know why people are so freaked.
I don't want to talk about you masturbating on air. It's gross.
Well, a lot of people want to make it into a GIF, your reaction, so I don't know what you're talking about. Lastly, Tommy Tahifi Bayless has been staying with me here at my apartment for about a month and a half. It has been a month. Come over here. People can't hear you.
All right, you want to switch?
Come over here, Ty. Come over here. Come over here. Come on. Ty's been going through a rough time recently, so we're gonna cheer him up. So, Ty, what have you been working on recently? Tell me what's been going on. You've been staying here. What do you think of New York? What do you think of staying with Jordan at his apartment?
Yeah, I think it's all terrible.
We need more than that.
That's it. No, everything is good. Everything is good. Just been feeling a little under the weather. That's all. But everything is all good.
You know, I will say, I'll speak for myself, not Ty. So I have suffered from depression in my life. I've had pretty bad depressive bouts about 3 times in my life. I take medication for it. No shame in saying that. I think it's a problem that it's kind of stigmatized in America. I think Ty is actually going through the doldrums because Ty has a lot of love to give. He's got a lot of love to give. And, it takes a special type of woman to receive that love. and he has, unfortunately, been a little loveless as of recently. Are you looking for love? Are you looking for a relationship, marriage, children?
I'm not looking for you're funny. No, I'm not looking for either or. I'm just, so I think sometimes you go through those phases where you're just you're not feeling it. You're feeling a little down or whatever. It could be the overcast and the weather. I'm not sure. But, you have those moments and you deal with them. It's really nothing that has nothing to do with anything exterior. I think it's all inside me.
I actually looked it up, and I believe alcohol and cigarettes are depressants. So if you're feeling down, you might want to do Gatorade. You might want to do avocados. You might want to do healthy food. Comedy is very good. Emma?
Let me add. So I think there's a lot. I wouldn't just advocate for medication because sometimes, there's a lot of side effects. I understand that you're pro it, but there's a lot of side effects.
Both of my therapists here.
The pharmaceutical industry has completely co-opted the conversation about depression. A lot of times what's best is really eating healthily, eating live foods. If there's a great book by Kelly. No, just like greens and getting them from the store that day. So if you read this, there's a really interesting woman named Kelly Brogan. Anyone that's struggled with depression should look into her. It's called a book called A Mind of Your Own. And she talks about how the pharmaceutical complex, the industrial complex, has really co-opted the discussion about depression. And a lot of it is exercising, a lot of it is getting outside, a lot of it is just eating healthily and eating live foods. And I don't know, it's like a bestseller. And the pharmaceutical Sorry. Well, anyway, I just wanted to throw my 2 cents because I actually, a few months ago, I was just super interested in the topic. I've never really had depression myself, but I listened to her on the Joe Rogan podcast. I'd really recommend that. Really interesting topic about how maybe we're going to look back on the way that these pills have been pushed. And some people need them, but some people don't. And it's been extremely overprescribed. That's all.
I agree. Yeah, I think sun is like one of the most underrated assets that we have or that we utilize because what is it? I think it's about 50% of the nation or the world, for that matter, is vitamin D deficient, and so that fucks with your psyche also. So it's a lot of things, but I don't know if I'm depressed. I don't want to get into that as if that's me. If we're having a general conversation, then I think that's cool. But I just think that I've been a little. There's been you always get in those positions where you're just feeling a little weird, where you are in a particular moment.
Well, I also think also there's all sorts of things. There could be depression, clinical. There could just be seasonal depression. There could be somebody died. There could be vitamin D deficiency. There could be a whole lot of different things. So it's always it's better not to kind of classify it as a term. I just say there's no one-size-fits-all solution. And I'm not a doctor. Emma's not a doctor. Ty's not a doctor. For me, medication really saved my life. I don't think it's the only thing that stabilized me, but when I was at my darkest point of depression runs in my family, I got on the right antidepressant, and it really took me out of it. And I needed to do other things like Emma was saying, exercise, eating healthier, this and that. But for me, it helped. For other people, it might not be the best thing. Also, some pills you need to check how it's affecting your liver function and other things if you take it for years and years and years. So I don't think I think it depends on the person, depends on the thing. But I will say that
and I abuse everything. That's why I don't want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, he does. I mean, if you saw my apartment, he definitely. Definitely, look at my brother here. Definitely abuses some things, but it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure having him here. He's been here for a while. We're trying, we're experimenting, maybe having time move out to New York. I don't think it's the sun because it's been very sunny the last few days.
You got to be in it.
And by the way, yeah, you do. By the way, climate change, Emma, it is not supposed to be this hot and humid at the end of September in New York City. Come over here, Vigilant. You vigilante. You get it? Vigilante?
Yeah,
Vigilante.
that's a great joke. I don't feel like we should fall into the trap. Well, no, I'm gonna go back. But I don't feel like we should fall into the trap of conservatives who bring a snowball onto the Senate floor and saying like, "Oh, look, it's cold here, so there's no climate change. Oh, now it's hot in New York, so there is." Like, it's about a totality, and it's about the scientific consensus.
No, but it's also it's not just about the temperature. It's also about the humidity. I've lived in New York most of my life. I don't remember it being this humid in New York City ever towards October. So that's just what I'm saying. Anyway, let me know, guys, if you like this banter, because Ty and I were thinking about having a show completely separate in politics. A little bit of relationships, a little bit of masturbation, a little bit about, health, pop culture, sports, rap game, country folk.
I didn't know that Hugh Hefner died today.
It's because you've been sleeping in bed all day. Get out of bed.
Well, not all day. Today I've actually been up, so that's not true.
That's true.
What's true?
Well, let me...
And then I was editing.
But what did you do at 1 a.m. this morning?
I was editing this morning. Oh, woke you up?
Uh-huh.
Why? Because your employee said I need to speak to him?
So I got a call from somebody at 1 a.m. The person, frankly, was a little inebriated, saying it was an emergency. It was not an emergency. I don't sleep well as it is, and now I'm all tired. Don't be confused. After this, I'm taking a nap. So don't wake me up at 1 in the morning again. You know who you are. But other than that, it's been a peachy day. Ty and I are going to hit the road next week. St. Louis, East Chicago, Flint, maybe some other places. We'll see. And
what else?
We're working on some other things. What else?
What else are we working on?
Oh, Curb Your Enthusiasm returns Sunday night. After a 6-year hiatus, Larry David, for any of you that need to know, is basically my idol. Not in terms of politics or journalism, because who cares what Larry David says, but in terms of just vernacular, in terms of etiquette, in terms of social bravery.
And so in terms of culture, I think your family, I never knew what a Jewish Jewish stereotype was until I hung around you and your family. And then to me, the stereotype, because I've seen Larry David, I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. I get it now, so I had a little point of reference, but I completely understand the humor. So it's always weird when you go into another culture, because you don't, if you haven't been around, you don't understand the humor, you don't get the certain references. Now, you watch Veep or you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm, it's like, oh, okay, I get it.
Joseph says, this is now becoming a Jordan Sheridan promotes things he finds amusing segment. I agree. Thank you, Joseph. Lastly,
oh, just let me say one thing. If you guys go to old, it was like, what is it called? Midnight Playhouse or something. It was back in the day. Hugh Hefner had he used to have this live show at the Playboy Bunny. I forgot. It was like midnight something. I forgot. But if you look at each episode in the background, you'll see Bill Cosby laughing with the shit-eating grin in his face, looking at somebody. I think he's putting shit in people's drinks.
And by the way, for the commenters that are confused, I wasn't talking about the masturbation stigma. I was talking about depression. Depression is like the flu in your brain. It's no different than if you have diabetes, you need insulin. It's just depression is an imbalance in your brain, just like you might have an imbalance in insulin levels, sugar levels, and other illnesses. So that's what I was talking about. There should be no stigma involved, and mental health is very important. It should be talked about not just when crazy people shoot up schools, which is the only time we talk about it in America.
A lot of people are coming to America now on the ships from Puerto Rico. Yes. Just reading that.
So we will break this up just like the Young Turks does and put all these videos up as fast as we can. Thank you for watching. Reality Rescued will be back when we're allowed. Goodbye.
Peace.
I think that was very popular.
It's still live.
No, I said it's shutting down.
No, this one. This says live.